I call to order the regular meeting of the City Commission, Monday, February 25th, 2019. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, has the roll been taken?
It has. All are present tonight.
Proclamations and presentations.
None this evening, sir.
Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to public input on agenda items. If you'd like to comment on anything on our agenda tonight, please step forward to the podium, state your name and your address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Lee Rogers and I live at 1053 East Maple Street, and each one of you in the commission and also the city manager, I sent a letter out today in regards to the narrowing of Maple Street, so everyone pretty much knows how I feel about it and how the hospital feels about it and all of our neighbors, and I'm asking you tonight to please keep the street as wide as it is, and to help us restore the historic value of that street coming off from Mission to the hospital. There are a stone edifice at the beginning of the street, and we would like to have either some lights put back. They were there at one time, and at the triangles that meet on the street, we would also like to plant some flowering bushes or shrubs there and make that street just look really nice, and so our neighborhood looks nice and that it will be a credit to our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Winchell-Gursky. I'm here with my husband, Robert. We live at 1054 East Maple, across the road from Leanne. And we feel the same way as far as being against the narrowing of the street. We bought our house a little bit over 5 years ago, and one of the things that we found very attractive about the neighborhood was the uniqueness of the setup on that street, the wider room, and also the nice view coming off of Mission, coming down towards the hospital, the big historic building of the hospital being very clear even from Mission. And it's just something that we would like to maintain as part of our neighborhood rather than narrowing it and having it look similar to other places. We just really like how different it is, and like what Leanne is talking about, adding a little bit more to what has been there before as far as the triangles that are in between. When it kind of veers off into South and North Drive, just increasing the aesthetic look of those areas, I think again would kind of add to the uniqueness of the area. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make public comment tonight on agenda items? Seeing none, I will close the public comment section. City Manager Ridley, would you like to go over the receipt of petitions and communications?
Yes, under this section tonight, you have the report on the pending items, the December minutes of the Planning Commission's work session and their regular meeting, the January minutes of the Airport Advisory Board, and a notification from the Federal Aviation Administration about an opportunity to comment on a pending project. And I guess I would like to comment on this briefly, that this project that we have the opportunity to comment on is because of the fact that we own the airport. out northeast of town. And the wind turbine project is being reviewed by the FAA for its potential impact it may or may not have on the airport. And we are one of 6 airports actually in Isabella County that received notification of that. Some of those airports are privately owned. So we have the opportunity to comment on the proposed project if we desire to. I would suggest that we have staff work with the Michigan Department of Aeronautics because they're familiar with the FAA requirements on required airspace around airports and have certainly dealt with other wind turbine issues throughout the country, and I think could advise us on whether there's a potential impact on our airport or not. So if the City Commission wants to offer comments, we can certainly draft those for you, but I would recommend that we do that based on input received from MDOT Aero if you're interested in doing that. So I'll be looking for some guidance from you on that. And then the last item we have under petitions and communications is you have 2 emails that were received today regarding Maple Street. One, as Mrs. Rogers indicated, is from her at 1053 East Maple, and the other one is from Leroy Rogers. So you each have copies of those in front of you tonight.
Thank you. We'll move on to consent calendar items. Consent calendar items are.
You have a couple.
Commissioner
Nancy,
Cooley.
what's the deadline for the comments on the aviation issue?
It is March. Let me look at it again. I can't remember off the top of my head. March 15th. So we have one more meeting before those would be due. So we will certainly work with MDOT in the meantime and can bring information forward to you at your next meeting.
Would a motion now be in order saying that that's the route we want to take?
You don't
No work.
typically do motions there. I would say you're probably better just waiting for the discussion, and then you could make the motion when you have it
Okay.
on your agenda.
But you could give some general direction to the staff that that's what the majority of you would prefer that we do if that you would like to do that short of a motion.
That's what I would want to happen is have it based on fact and not on rumor. So working with the State Aviation Board would be the way I would like to see our staff word a comment and bring it to us.
Are there any major objections to that kind of an approach?
I think that's good.
I don't see any.
Okay.
We'll move on to consent calendar items. Consent calendar items are items on the agenda with an asterisk next to them. Are there any items that anyone like to remove from the consent calendar tonight? Okay, seeing none, Manager Ridley, would you like to go over the consent agenda?
Yes, the items we've recommended for this tonight are approval of your minutes of your regular and closed meeting of February 11th. We have 2 bids for you this evening on the consent calendar. The first is for engineering services for the Brown Street reconstruction project in 2020. We've received a state Michigan Department of Transportation grant for part of the cost of the reconstruction of this street, and it's to reconstruct Brown between North Drive to Broadway Street. We have typically used outside engineering services for projects partially funded by MDOT due to the additional reporting requirements and requirements that they have for such projects. For professional services contracts, low bid is not always the controlling factor. It's based on a comprehensive quality-based selection process, and the criteria used is qualifications of the firm, relevant experience, and quality of the proposed work plan. So based on a review of the 7 proposals that were received, we're recommending a contract with Prine and Newhoff for these engineering services, and that would be a not-to-exceed contract for $72,365 for both the design, engineering, and the construction oversight for that project. Our second bid this evening is for the purchase of the steel structure for the Arts Pavilion that's to be constructed in Island Park this year. As you're well aware, Mount Pleasant High School student Taylor Idema has been working on this project with Chris Bundy from our Parks and Public Spaces Department, and so far $203,750 has been raised in grants and donations for this project. So the first step was the bidding of the steel infrastructure, of which we received 3 bids, and we're recommending the low bid of American Athletics for $58,925. And there's a rendering of that steel part of the structure that was in your packet. Once this is approved, we can then bid the rest of the elements for the pavilion, which include the concrete, the sound walls, the pillars, the electrical, and those other auxiliary features of it. The next 2 items are amendments to existing contracts we have, and they're not your typical not-to-exceed contracts, even though we put not-to-exceed limits on them. But typically a not-to-exceed contract, like I just talked about with the engineering services, is used when the scope of work is well-defined and the contractor assumes all the risk for how much time it's really going to take to do that. But in the past, we've bid contracts for snow removal at the airport and snow hauling in the downtown, and those contracts are actually bid on a per-hour basis. But sometime in previous years, we started bringing them to you with a not-to-exceed dollar amount on them, which is really a budget control feature. It's really not a limitation on the vendor providing the service, because they only come when staff decides we need them to do that based on the weather conditions. So we need to look at that for the future. But in the meantime, we do have not-to-exceed contracts that have been signed out there, and we're recommending amendments to both of them for this year because of the weather patterns that we've had. The first one is with Pat McGurk Excavating for snow removal at the airport. Last fall, that contract was approved with a not-to-exceed amount of $18,500. And we haven't exceeded that yet, but we're very close to it. And with the still having a few months of winter in front of us, we're recommending an amendment to that. Oh, you're hoping it's shorter than that? I hope so too. But we're recommending an amendment to it of $6,000. So the not-to-exceed amount for this year would be $24,500. And again, we would only spend that if it's needed based on the winter snowfall. The second contract is for the hauling of the snow out of the downtown. Exact same scenario where, in this case, though, we have exceeded the $14,000 not-to-exceed amount, so we're recommending an amendment of $10,000 for that contract, which will hopefully get us through the rest of the winter. And in both cases, the action you're taking tonight would approve the contract amendment and the budget amendment. And the next item on the consent calendar is authorizing the mayor to sign the paperwork to accept Collins Drive into our street inventory. And this allows us to be eligible for Act 51 for the ongoing maintenance of that street. So we're asking for that approval of that resolution this evening. And then for the appointment to the Zoning Board of Appeals, annually the Planning Commission makes a recommendation as to which member will serve as the crossover member from the Planning Commission to the ZBA. And they've recommended this year, again, that Corey Friedrich fill that role. So we're asking you to confirm that appointment. And then the last item on payrolls and warrants, or the last item on the consent calendar, is approval of the payrolls and warrants.
Commissioner Kulik.
Move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Vice Mayor Gillis.
Second.
I would just like to add in discussion that I am still very excited about the pavilion that's coming to Island Park. Obviously, we're one day closer to having that as a reality, and what a great project that's been from the start, and I'm sure it's something our whole community will enjoy in the future. And also, if you haven't noticed, the county is also having issues with their budget with snow removal, and so this year's winter, it's just been something you can't control, but we try to budget for what we expect on a yearly basis, and obviously, the weather always has different ideas than we'd like, so. Is there any other discussion on consent agenda? Commissioner Kulik?
Before the meeting, I was talking to our DPW director, and this is more of an informational thing, that we have salt. Of course, salt doesn't do much good when the temperature drops below 20 degrees, but we have salt. We pre-ordered enough, and it's been delivered, so we're okay.
Any other discussion? Without seeing anything, all those in favor of accepting the consent agenda, notice by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? Consent agenda is approved unanimously. So we'll move on to agenda item number 7, which is the public hearing on the special assessment for District Number 1. Manager Ridley, do you have any comments?
Just a couple. As you know, we've been doing pedestrian lighting since 2014. This year's project is on Pleasant, Clayton, Gaylord, and May. And tonight's public hearing is to obtain public comment on the estimated costs that are spread to the property owners on the special assessment roll. So after the public hearing tonight, we would ask you to consider resolution number 5, which is the last step in the process. And if that's approved, what that would do is indicate that you accept the assessment roll as it was presented, and then it sets repayment terms for those property owners who choose to spread the cost over multiple years. And the repayment terms that we have recommended are consistent with the repayment terms that we used for alley assessments last year, and that would be a 3% interest rate and payment over 6 years, which results in an average payment of approximately $500 throughout the district. So we recommend you hold the public hearing and then consider resolution number 5.
Okay. I will open the public hearing now. Is there anyone who'd like to wish to speak on this? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Commissioner Kulik.
Move to approve Resolution 5 for the approval of the roll and setting of the payment terms for the Special Assessment District.
Commissioner Lalone. Second. Any discussion? Vice Mayor Gillis.
I would like to ask if the commissioners would entertain a friendly amendment to the assessment rolls so that we would eliminate the 3% interest that is being charged to our community members for this improvement. We have similar times where we have not made a developer incur interest, or we've paid developers interest when we owed them brownfield monies. You're aware of how we redid the brownfields a couple years ago, the commissioners that I served with. But I really don't feel the need that we have to charge them 3% on monies that they owe us, being that we are taking the steps of saying that we want lighting there. The least we can do is allow them to repay that within the 6 years, but not to charge them the 3%. So my motion, or my amendment to the current motion would be to eliminate the 3% interest charged to those parcel owners. And I'll need a second if anyone else agrees.
Commissioner Toles. I'll second it. Okay. Discussion. Commissioner Kulik.
Can we legally do that?
Since we don't have bonds issued for this project, it
But
certainly is at your discretion.
The issue of giving benefit that we haven't given benefit in the past for.
That was going to be the next thing I was going to say, is it's at your discretion. Typically, the state law recommends that you should not be lending credit to individuals at no cost to them. So there should be some extenuating circumstances of why you would want to do that. And when we discussed this during the alley paving project, the city attorney recommended that it would be best to charge some kind of an interest rate. I don't have all of those notes with me about all of his rationale, but his recommendation was that there should be an interest rate, but it ultimately becomes your decision.
I just see this as a slippery slope that I really have no interest in going down.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Ling?
I'm sort of split between Vice Mayor Gillis and Commissioner Gulick on this, in that, as the city manager knows, I've always been someone who's pushed for keeping that interest rate as low as possible. I do remember the discussion that we had from the attorney and the rationale for suggesting there should be some interest rate. I hate to change it when we just had the discussion and just came up with that and have used it in a similar situation. I would be open to this year reviewing it and determining if there is a more appropriate interest rate, or if we charge typically a 1 or 2% interest rate that would cover our costs and meet the legal obligation, but still keep that cost to a minimum. But I'm not comfortable changing it in the middle of an assessment process. So I hope we can have further discussion of it at another time, but I am going to vote against, although I have great sympathy for the reasoning behind it.
Is there any other discussion? We have a vote on Commissioner Gillis's amendment. All those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. The motion fails 2-4, or 2-5.
What were the 2-4?
Gillis and Toles. So this brings us back to the original motion. Is there any more discussion? Vice Mayor Gillis.
I'll make one more friendly amendment that we reduce the interest rate to 1%.
Is there a second on the motion? Second. Commissioner Toles seconds. Discussion? Commissioner Kulik.
We're going to go back and look at every special assessment we've done in the last 5 years and lower those interest rates also? I think not. I'll be voting against this also.
Is there any more discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails 2-5. Same. This brings us back to the original motion. Is there any more discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving resolution number 5 for the special assessment of District 1, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Opposed.
The motion passes 6-1. This brings us to agenda item 8A, 2019 pedestrian street lighting.
As you saw in your packet, we received 6 bids for the purchase and installation of the pedestrian-style streetlights for the 2019 project, which includes the previously approved special assessment district, plus some additional lights in the CD3 district along those streets. We're recommending the low bid of CNR Electric at $156,800, which is just under the budgeted amount.
Commissioner Kulik.
Move the approval of the pedestrian lighting expense.
Seconded by Commissioner Lalone. Commissioner Kulik.
Just have one question. As we're to the point now where we've got these street lights in several locations around the city, these pedestrian lights, do we have an extra pole and an extra head someplace stored at DPW, so in case one of these gets whacked, we can just replace it quickly? I know we'll get reimbursed by the insurance company for the cost, because when I did the Mission Street project, we had one whacked there in front of the Rite Aid and knocked it down. And fortunately, when we did that project, we had I think one or two extra light poles that were stored at DPW, so that when it came down, we were able to replace it quickly and then get reimbursed by the insurance company and buy another replacement to go back into storage.
Yes, at this point in time, we don't have any in reserve right now, and this bid would not include that at this point.
And I'm not suggesting that we add it to the special assessment roll. I would think that in the future, when we do these projects, the city should buy an extra light pole and an extra light and have it stored on hand, so that, somebody goes up over the curb and knocks one down, we can get it back up in a hurry.
Is there any more discussion? All those in favor of approving the bid for the 2019 pedestrian street lighting, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Move on to agenda item number 11, the discussion of the reconstruction design of Maple Street and confirm current design.
Let me give some background.
Yeah, please.
As some of the commissioners will remember, we communicated with the property owners along Maple Street last March regarding the planned reconstruction of the street. And as you heard from the from the public comment this evening, some of the residents presented a petition last fall asking that the design be reconsidered because the plan was to narrow the street from approximately 41 feet to approximately 37 feet. And the conceptual design that was shared with the neighborhood was in compliance with the non-motorized plan, the complete streets ordinance, and is consistent with the zoning ordinance, even though, as we talked about during the joint meeting with the Planning Commission, is not a requirement, but it was an opportunity to bring it into compliance with that during the total reconstruction. When that petition was received, we also received a communication from the CEO of McLaren Central Michigan at the next meeting, indicating some questions or some input he had into the project. And we followed up with his office after that meeting, explaining the design, and indicated if there were still some concerns, we would be happy to meet with him. And throughout the fall, when those discussions were going on, I indicated that we would move forward unless we heard from the City Commission that there was interest in rediscussing the design. And in hindsight, as I told one of the neighbors today, that probably was not the appropriate approach of how to deal with that. We probably should have talked about it to bring closure to the issue, because the residents were left wondering if it was going to be redesigned and when they would hear about that. And that's an unfortunate situation for our residents to be in. Because we did not discuss it during the fall and no direction was given to change it, we did continue to move forward with the design according to the conceptual plan, and now we're at a situation where we have that design complete and it's ready to go out for bid. And that proposed design includes 2 10-foot driving lanes and continues the parallel parking along both sides of the street, just as is allowed now, but it allows for the narrowing of the street. Based on the unique character of the neighborhood, the design does retain the unique triangles at both North and South Drive, and it will not impact the stone wall at Mission and Maple. We did do some research to try to find some information about lighting on those stone walls and haven't been able to find anything that would indicate what that was like back then, but we continue to research that, but so far have had no success. So at this point, there's no plan to make any changes to those stone walls. During the development of the agenda, I believe it was Vice Mayor Gillis requested that the matter be brought on the agenda for discussion, so that you have it before you tonight. As I indicated in the memo, because we've continued to move forward, you certainly have the opportunity to change the design. It's just important that you understand and the neighbors understand the implications of that decision based on where we are with the design. And what I outlined in the memo is that we would need to rework that design to reduce some of the grades and some of the intricacies of the design if it were to stay at 41 feet. And then based on that, we would have to redo all of the bid documents, which were scheduled to go out by the end of this month. And the estimate is that that work would take maybe approximately 3 weeks to ripple through all of the work that needs to be done. When we bid it after that, we expect that the prices might be higher for 2 reasons. One is at 41 feet, there would be more materials that would be needed. So that would bring the prices up just because of the additional materials of the wider street. but we also expect that it may impact the cost because we're out in the market a little bit later in the year. And our experience has been the earlier in the year we bid those street projects, the better pricing we get because contractors are not as booked up, and so they can fit us in more easily. And then consumers would have to redesign the lights, which is another item on your agenda. So our recommendation is to move forward with as it's currently designed, because it's a one-time opportunity to impact that street and have it closer to what our desired land use practices are. But at the end of the day, it becomes your decision as to whether you want to move forward with that or not. So as I indicated in the memo, if you agree with our recommendation, technically no action is needed, but because of the uncertainty that we created last fall by not taking action, I am recommending that you take action this evening one way or the other so that the staff knows and so that the neighborhood knows.
Vice Mayor Gillis.
Yes, I move to confirm the design for Maple Street as is in its 41-foot current width. The design of Maple Street to be designed with the current width of 41 feet. Or as is.
I guess it might be clearer if the motion were to ask for a redesign of the street, because the way it's designed for this year is at the lower one. So it might be, for clarity, I would suggest maybe to say to redesign it at the current 41 feet. Might be clearer if you're okay with that.
Okay.
Is there a second? Commissioner Malone. Discussion. Commissioner Kulik.
Everything we've discussed over the last several years has been that narrowing streets has positive impacts on those streets by reducing speed of traffic on that street and getting everybody to behave better, be it the bikers, the parkers, or the cars on the street, the ambulances, everything else on there. I'll be voting against that, against keeping the street at 41 feet. My gut feeling tells me that if you're going to narrow that street approximately a foot and a half off each side, by the time the job is done, nobody's going to notice the difference out there. It's still going to be a grand street at 37 feet rather than 41 feet. The neighbors have asked that we start planting shrubs and flowers and things of that sort on these islands out there. Are we going to start doing this on the islands on Arnold Street and Kenny Street as well? We do have a program for neighborhood capacity building where the neighborhood can get together and work with our, it used to be the neighborhood improvement group that has $500 mini grant. It is $500, isn't it, Nancy?
Yes.
$500 mini grants that they can apply for over several years and take these extra maintenance on the islands on as a neighborhood capacity building project. So I am not in support of this action this evening.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Toles.
I'm not in support of this current design. I've lived here for 50-plus years. That was designed like that. It's a historical corridor, as far as I'm concerned. And I think it was done that way on purpose, that if you had parked cars for a safety feature for people trying to expedite to the hospital. I'm kind of disappointed with staff on this redesign when we have multiple other streets that are in disrepair. You have parking lots downtown that are a disaster. You have the north end where a bunch of my properties are that are still gravelled with no curb and gutter, and when it rains, I have to take a boat to my property. This just doesn't make any sense. It's a waste of taxpayers' money. It should be kept at 41 feet.
Is there any other discussion? Commissioner Ling.
I agree with a lot of what the city manager said in terms of if we could back up. I think all of us agree that perhaps if we had had this vote on, okay, these questions have come up, we've received a petition, we had a letter from the hospital, do we want to do something different? It's not meant as a criticism of either the commission or the staff. I think in both cases, we probably needed to say, have we reached closure here? I guess I would have to say, as an individual commissioner, I hadn't exactly felt like we had reached closure. I kind of thought when we said, well, can we reach back to the hospital and find out, because we've kind of had two different indications of whether they're for or against it. I thought we were going to get something back. I probably should have asked for it, you know, so I'm not, I think this was a case where, with lots of other things that were going on, communication kind of got lost somewhere in the shuffle of everything that was going on. As we've had this discussion and as we've talked about, and now our new plan is to have narrower streets, which I think in some circumstances are useful, but not necessarily in all circumstances. As I said, when we were having the planning, our joint meeting with the Planning Commission, there's competing issues here in terms of the width of the street and the uses of the street, and also the historical nature of the street. And sometimes, from my perspective, I've been a little frustrated occasionally that we couldn't put better bike lanes in because the streets were too narrow to be able to put the bike lanes in. Or we've had discussion of not our part of Crapo, but north of High Street, that really narrow part of Crapo, which is, I think, an example of where the narrowness of it can be a problem. So I guess I'd like us to perhaps, before we, on other designs, went further, that we revisit that question of when do we want to narrow and when do we want to keep it wider. So that in this particular situation, I think there are a number of things that suggest that keeping it the width that it is historically, it fits the historical nature of that street. But on the other hand, I hate to see us starting over again with the design. When I don't think it's anyone's particular fault that we ended up here without having had closure on it. So I'm going to ask a question I'm sure the city manager is not going to want me to ask, because I know I'm going to be asking for a ballpark figure, but do we have any idea, an estimate of about how much more it might cost us if we waited a couple of weeks in order to do a redesign?
Before the decision's made, or the 3 weeks to redo it before we bid it? I'm not sure.
Well, if we were to postpone this, and I guess what I'm really saying is if we postponed it and made the decision in a couple of weeks so that we could get an estimate of what we were looking at in terms of redesigning and rebidding, would it be worth doing that? Or is it too unclear what the financial impact is going to be?
Well, there's one financial impact that engineering was able to grossly estimate, and that's for the additional materials that might be needed. And the best guess at that amount is approximately $20,000. Now, the amount that the prices will change based on bidding it later is not a number that we can give to you, because we don't really know what will happen during the bid process, and whether the decision's made tonight and we bid in 3 weeks, or whether you wait 2 more weeks and then we bid 3 weeks after that. There would be no way in either circumstance to give you a verifiable number of what that financial impact might be.
Commissioner Kulik.
What would the estimated cost for DPW's design work be? You said it's going to take approximately 3 weeks to do a redesign on it. That's a lot of man hours, I would assume.
Yeah, I don't know the estimated amount of, because part of that's an opportunity cost, because we're paying those individuals regardless, so it's a matter of they would be working on this project instead of working on some other project. So I don't have a dollar amount associated with that I would feel comfortable providing to you.
Commissioner Kulik.
One other issue, we are having problems, we've been addressing it, the issue of stormwater runoff. Obviously, the more we have paved in the city, the bigger demand it puts on the storm system. And if we can have the opportunity to narrow that street by 1.5 feet on each side, that's less runoff that's going to end up in our storm system.
Commissioner Toles.
I disagree. This project, I don't believe is going to cost more money because you're not moving the curbs and gutters to reduce it to 36 feet. You're also not moving sidewalks. So for the extra aggregate you're going to put on the road and the extra paving, I don't think it's going to cost more.
Director Zhang, did you have any comment on how much it might cost for the man hours?
As a rough number, somewhere around 5,000 if you were going to start and re-engineer it over again. You're right, Commissioner Kulik, about reducing the storm drain. That is an impact. Also, it has been the Commission's direction to us to say, here's how you make streets safer by narrowing this down. It's still going to be a very wide street, but City Manager Ridley said there's no way to estimate how much the bidding will go up when it's bid out later.
Commissioner Kulik.
If we left it at 41 feet, would we still be taking out all the curb and gutter?
Yes, we would be.
Okay.
Yeah, I was assuming that.
The curb, Stacy's nodding her head, the curb and gutter needs to be replaced, so we would be replacing that at 41 feet or at 37 feet.
Vice Mayor Gillis.
When the neighborhood brought us a petition in the end of September, and then again we received the CEO of McLaren's Hospital's letter in October, we, as City Commission, kind of just set it aside. We had a lot of things going on. We were discussing sidewalk snow removal. We were discussing application deadlines for medical marijuana, which Commissioner Ling wanted to move up, and so there was a lot of discussion about that. We were also, during this timeline, working on the budget. And then, of course, in November, we were dealing with the Citizens Advisory Board. And then December, we only had one meeting. So we actually, in my opinion, kind of ignored the requests of the community members on Maple Street. I had spoke twice after the petition was delivered to us, and they asked for our help, showing this picture to all of you. I know you guys remember this because I showed it to you, of the historical hospital. I asked at that time during the part on the agenda if anybody else was interested. Myself and this commissioner at the time last year had both voiced our concerns that yes, we think that Maple does have historical significance and an entryway to our prominent building that's been here for 60 years. Since 1943, I think I read that the city hospital was first erected here. So we kind of ignored our community members that asked us to represent them. I would like to make it clear that if someone in our downtown area wants something done, they go to Michelle Sponseller, our downtown development director, and they pitch their idea, and Michelle goes out and talks to staff and gets something on the agenda like the igloo that we voted on last commission meeting. When Parcel B's developer needs any help with things that are now changing in that agreement, where they want us to move the electrical poles in the front of this Parcel B, move the lift station, and move the stormwater drain underneath, because that's starting to show problems with what they've decided to do with that parcel, along with all the impervious surfaces that we're covering up in Parcel B that's going to add to that stormwater runoff. they go to Mr. Merdeza, our Economic Development Director, to help them solve these problems or ask for brownfield reimbursements to address those three things that now they're finding problems with developing that parcel. Staff goes out of their way to help these people. Yet when we have regular town folk, regular community members that come to us, we receive a petition, they speak to us at the podium. The next month, we get a letter from the CEO of McLaren, and we don't address any of it. And so I spoke to all of you, asking, you know, shouldn't we at least give them a yes or a no, because we are their representatives. They don't have staff members that they can take their concerns to. They come to us because we are their elected officials. We are their staff members when they have concerns or something that they want us to look at more deeply. So it really disturbs me that we put that on the back burner for them for 3 months last fall. That was on us. So now we are here in January. January, we selected mayor and vice mayor. That was kind of the meeting. Everybody, we had 2 new commissioners join in. We were sworn in. The second meeting in January was canceled because of the snowstorm. The first meeting in February, I brought it up in the mayor and vice mayor agenda meeting. Our city manager was out of the country, and the person who was running that meeting with us was uncomfortable about putting that on the agenda then, without Ms. Ridley being involved in that. That is why now it has dropped down to the end of February, where we're finally giving the community members a yes or a no on this concern of narrowing Maple Street, which has been like this for 50-some years. I also want you to, I've printed out beautiful pictures of our historical hospital when it was first built. I know this might be considered kind of a little too much visuals, but I think sometimes pictures speak louder than words. And so when we're talking about a historical significant building such as this, and Maple Street being 41 feet in width from Mission to this historical building down Maple Street, it's the only place designed in Mount Pleasant where you exit Mission Street and it branches out in 3 different streets: North Drive, South Drive, and Maple Street. That was designed on purpose to call attention and historical significance to a building that's been there close to 70 years. I also then went to the master plan. Commissioners and staff alike always like to refer to what was in the master plan. What does the master plan tell us? So I've given you both all copies of the master plan. This is the one that is currently in effect, adopted in 2015. During the Vision Fair, people voted on what they were concerned of. The second top vote getter was retain the historical character of the city where possible. The same number of votes, 9, during this Vision Fair, filled out by our community members that came to discuss our master plan, was encourage and prioritize neighborhood preservation and property maintenance. I would assume this is neighborhood preservation, keeping this wide street like it's been for almost 70 years. On the next page, under neighborhoods in our master plan, it states, one moment please. Participants in the vision session and focus groups demonstrated a strong commitment to livable neighborhoods. The fact that this topic area drew the most responses from participants reinforces the importance of where we live and how that relates to our image of the city in general. And then we go into the next page of the neighborhood section of our master plan under general goals for neighborhoods. B, retain the historical character of the city where possible. C, encourage and prioritize neighborhood preservation and property maintenance. And then on the next page, we have a a numeral or a letter B, retain the historical character of the city where possible, and under those strategies was create a plan to preserve historic buildings throughout the city, including those in residential neighborhoods. And then the C bullet point in the master plan was encourage and prioritize neighborhood preservation and property maintenance. So all of these things have already been stated in the master plan, giving us strategies and prioritizing what our community members focused on in 2014 when we developed this master plan. Let alone that the community members were here last fall asking us to decide on this, which if we would have moved as a city commission together and either answered you yes or no, all these other implications that are now happening, where engineering will take 3 more weeks, bids may be higher, we can deal with bids being higher because we can just wait till 2020. If that is a real concern of a higher bid, that a construction company will give us a higher bid because it's going out later, we could probably postpone this to 2020. And then our engineer will have plenty of time to redesign this street. Redesign it to its current state. Let's remind you, it's not redesigning to something bigger or smaller. We're redesigning that street to its current state. Lastly, I just want to read, hold on, what the CEO of McLaren letter had stated. He took the time when his community neighbors came and said, hey, they're planning on reducing the street to 37 feet. And obviously the CEO of McLaren Hospital felt the need that he would write a letter also to the city commissioners urging us to leave the 41 feet width. And part of his letter says, having a sense of sameness may make for better traffic flow within the community, but being a cookie-cutter town isn't always a great draw for tourists or visitors. I come from Sandusky, Ohio area, and there was a neighboring town that ended up doing exactly what your commission is proposing, and it destroyed the feel of the town and all the history that made it such a unique town to begin with. So I think it's a small ask from the community members that we have put on the back burner and ignored their request. It is a small ask from them to us to allow them to enjoy the wide street, allow the historical significance of the hospital to be accented by that wide street, along with the fact that paramedics, because one of my friends is a paramedic and EMS person that rides in the ambulance, and they quite frequently take Maple Street down. They don't take Brown to the hospital. They go down Mission and then take Maple in, because Brown goes right by a school. So they, on their traffic schedules or when they're bringing someone in, use Maple Street quite often because it's wide, and if there's traffic along that street, it's wide enough for people to pull over and them to get to the front of the hospital. So I urge my fellow commissioners to think of these community members just as important as the developer on Parcel B or a downtown business owner that wants to take up a parking space for an igloo. These people also asked us to do something that is such a small ask that if we would have addressed it last November or October, we wouldn't be in this situation. But that is not their fault. And so I really think that we should continue to keep that at 41 feet as our master plan, current master plan suggests. Thank you for your time.
Do we have any more discussion on the issue? I would just like to add that real quickly, that I view this this item coming up to our attention as a failure of the process that we have. As Commissioner Gillis and others have noted, that back last fall we were aware that there was a petition and that almost every person who lives on Maple Street was against the narrowing of the street, and this body at the time failed to really pick up that issue. And this was like our first opportunity to really put it on the agenda and have a discussion. I would really stand by our staff's work. I think that we have a very professional and a very outstanding staff who do work day in and day out, and I can understand the frustration that this might cause, having to redo work, and also the frustration that it will cost us more money, and that money comes from our 25,000 plus citizens in the city. And so this is not an easy decision to make, but I will be supporting the motion as is. So is there any more discussion?
Mayor, may I make just one comment, please?
Yes.
In reference to one of the items Commissioner Gillis mentioned about the ability to put the reconstruction off until 2020, we can certainly look at that. My concern with that possibility is that we will be, as we talked about earlier, we will be reconstructing part of Brown Street in 2020. So we would really need to look at if those projects could both happen in the same year or not. We can't really delay Brown Street because of the state grant that we have, but we could certainly look at that possibility about if it was delayed to alleviate some of the financial concerns, is that even possible with what's already planned for that area? So we can evaluate that.
Commissioner Kulik.
I would suspect by delaying this a year, any cost savings will be eaten up in inflationary cost, and it'll end up costing us more in 2020 than it would this year.
Seeing no more discussion, I will move to a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-2.
Clarification on that motion, please. The motion was to leave the street at 41 feet and not redesign it to 37.
Right, to do the reconstruction at 41, right?
To leave it as is. I made the motion in the affirmative to leave it as is.
Yeah, would you read the motion?
I have down direct staff to redesign reconstruction of Maple Street at the existing 41 feet.
Okay.
So that was the motion.
I didn't understand that. I'm changing my vote to yes.
Because you had spoken favor, so I was assuming yes.
Jeremy, how do we do that?
I don't know, we haven't had that one come up.
So,
just
did
vote
you get
again
that?
and we can, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Just
So,
Yeah, say it again.
so 6-1? Or should we
just have it
redo the vote?
Yeah.
So all those in favor of doing the reconstruction at 41 feet,
As it is currently.
please vote by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed?
Aye.
So 6-1. Move on to agenda item number 12, consider the resolution authorizing an amendment to the standard lighting contract between the city and Consumers Energy.
Based on your previous action, this will have to be redesigned, so I recommend you postpone action on this until we've completed the redesign and can bring new costs from Consumers Energy.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 14, consider a budget amendment for the Parks and Public Spaces Department for a temporary/seasonal position. Manager Ridley, would you like to introduce us?
Yes, as you know, we've had numerous discussions about staffing levels and the challenges as a result of our staffing levels, and we've committed to you that if we can't meet current services with existing staff, that we would bring forward recommendations to you for your consideration. Typically, we do that during the operating budget development process, so this one is a little bit out of sync from what you would normally receive these kind of recommendations. And the staff in the Parks and Public Spaces Department did bring this item forward at the staff level as we were putting together the 2019 budget. But we spent a lot of time on our due diligence looking at if there were ways to reallocate work, if there were ways of sharing positions, or any other methods to meet those increasing maintenance needs and supervision needs in the parks and be able to maintain our standard of care. And we spent a lot of time and sent the staff back a number of times to evaluate different ways to do that. And when we completed that analysis, we became convinced that there was a need for additional staffing in order to properly maintain our parks and public spaces, but we still did not see it as a 12-month-a-year need necessarily. So we came to the conclusion that we were comfortable recommending a 9-month position that would be a skilled position that would be more focused on light equipment mechanic maintenance that could be stationed centralized at the park shop to help maintain all of the equipment used by the park staff and the seasonal employees, and thereby it would free up the 2 full-time field workers to be able to be out in the field and to properly provide oversight for our various seasonal employees. The union contract allows us to have 9-month positions outside of the union, but we discussed the concept with union leadership to make sure they were understanding and supportive of what we were recommending. So by the time we got through all of that, we were in November, which you just talked about. There was a lot going on at that point in time. So even though we brought it up in one of our budget discussions, I think there was general agreement that it was kind of late in the process to be able to absorb that and make a decision on it in a timely manner. So it was suggested that we talk about this matter after the first of the year. So this is an ideal situation which would be great for a work session discussion so that we could have more discussion with the staff about the analysis that was done and how we got to that conclusion, and that's typically what we would do during the budget process. But unfortunately, because we're off cycle, that doesn't work as well for us. And in order for this position to be effective this summer, we really need to start the recruiting process in March to get somebody on board in April. And so that's why we are bringing it to you directly as an agenda item for your consideration. So what we're recommending is a one-time budget amendment, and those funds would come out of the dollars that were placed into the fund balance at the end of last year during the December amended budget. And those monies come from additional revenues we weren't expecting or decreased expenditures. And this one-time budget amendment would allow us to hire the 9-month position this year and be able to use it throughout the peak season of the parks, and then be able to evaluate if it is really providing the needed care and maintenance of our parks and the appropriate supervision for our seasonal employees, so that we could then make a better informed decision for you through the 2020 operating budget about whether it should be an ongoing funded position in future years. So our recommendation for you tonight is a one-time budget amendment so that the position could be hired this year and evaluated, and then we could bring you a more formal long-term recommendation as part of the 2020 budget process. And the estimated cost of the position would be approximately $38,000, because the way the position is structured under the Affordable Care Act, we would be required to offer health insurance to the position, and so that's a piece of that estimated cost. So we're recommending the one-time budget amendment for you this evening.
Commissioner Kulik,
So moved.
is there a second on the motion? Commissioner Lalonde? Any discussion? Commissioner Toles?
So if I understand this right, we had Public Works doing maintenance on all this equipment. So we made budget cuts there. Now we have to hire another person at $38,000.
No, the maintenance on this equipment has always been done by our park staff. So the 2 full-time staff that we have historically, in the Parks and Public Spaces Department, have historically done this work.
So Public Works has never done work on mowers and other stuff?
Not the kind of work that we're looking to have this position do. This is more on the small handheld equipment. Public Works has certainly maintained our larger mowers that we have in the park system, but the smaller equipment that's used on a daily basis has been maintained by the Parks Department.
Commissioner Kulik.
This would be the chainsaws, leaf blowers, push mowers, edgers, equipment of that sort?
And then would be available to help deploy the seasonal staff out to the different jobs in the parks as well.
Vice Mayor Gillis?
From what I remember at the agenda meeting, it was like a supervisor for all the seasonal people to train them, show them how to use the different equipment. And I am very hesitant to add any staff to our current load. It is our #1 line item when it comes to budget is salaries. If a position were to incorporate snow removal on sidewalks in the wintertime, I may take a different approach. But at this time, I see if we start a position, even though it's part-time for only 9 months and seasonal, it usually turns into a full-time position. We just eliminated a full-time position, or a part-time position from downtown, the events coordinator, I think that was called, or?
No, we didn't eliminate it. We reallocated the work and are hiring recreation assistants to do that work instead. So it's we're hiring assistants instead of a coordinator. So it was just a reallocation of the work, but we didn't eliminate any jobs.
Okay. Well, that would have made me feel better because at least we eliminated one staff.
Gotta be honest about it.
Darn it. Well, I appreciate that. But I also know that every time we do hire someone new, we not only give them benefits, we give them defined benefits for pension and retiree, along with tuition reimbursement. If, in case they wanted to go back to school, they get complete tuition reimbursement. Our employees are treated very well. They do a great job for the city, but at this time, I won't be voting in favor of this.
Commissioner Kulik.
Nancy, this isn't a union position, is it? It's not going to have all those other benefits with it, is it?
Nope, not yet.
As a 9-month position, it would not have those benefits. If we added additional work to it, such as sidewalk snow plowing, if you decided to do that, then it could very readily become a 12-month benefited position, and that would happen. But based on what we're expecting today, we are thinking the 9 months may be adequate for this services.
I implicitly trust Nancy and Mary Ann and staff to make staffing recommendations to us that make sense. Every time there's been a retirement, they do a very extensive process to determine whether that position is still needed, whether the job should be restructured in a different way. When they come to us and say, wait a minute, things in Parks and Rec right now, or Parks and Grounds, or whatever we're calling it today, are to the point where we don't think we can continue to maintain the quality of care for our parks and grounds and things, I think we have to take that seriously and do what they ask for. We can afford this. Nancy's memo earlier stated that we've got numerous retirements that are going to be taking place, and I'm sure they're going to be looking at how those jobs are going to be reallocated as well. I will be supporting this.
Any more discussion? I have a question for the manager, Ridley. This position will include a health care benefit because of the Affordable Care Act?
We're required to offer health care to the position based on that act.
And those the health care benefit, is that the same as our union employees receive?
Yes, because we have a self-funded plan, we wouldn't want to create a unique plan for just one position, so we would offer the same plan that our union employees have.
And if this position is successful in its 9 months, and bar any future development and any workload, what would be the plan of executive staff for the Parks Department?
If it's successful and we can meet the ongoing maintenance needs by having the 9-month skilled position that we've recommended, then we would recommend that in the 2020 budget, that funding be allocated to continue that at the approximate $38,000 cost. If we find that it's not working effectively, then we go back to the drawing board and either look at different ways to do that and or see if there's a recommendation for, as Commissioner Gillis mentioned, whether it really needs a full-time 12-month benefited position. But it could go either way along those lines, and that's where the evaluation period this year would help us to know that, to know what our true ongoing costs should be to appropriately maintain our parks.
And what is current staffing level of full-time employees at our Parks Department?
The total employees in our park that are allocated to our Parks and Public Spaces Department is 4.5 employees. There's 2 field staff, a half-time clerical, and then the Director of Parks and the Coordinator of Parks.
Is that consistent with previous year's staffing levels?
Yeah, I think it's been staffed at that level since at least 2014 or 15, I believe. I don't remember the exact year, but right in that time frame, as it's been at that staffing level since then.
And we have 25 seasonal employees.
Correct. And this temporary position, would they be working 40 hours a week?
Yes, that's our expectation.
Okay. And the difference between this position and a seasonal position is that a seasonal position would be 40 hours for a maximum of 6 months?
That's where you get into the technical difference between what's a seasonal position and what's a temporary position. And according to the Affordable Care Act, we have a number of limitations that we have to look at in the scheduling of those positions. And we have to juggle the number of hours and the number of months to make sure that we're in compliance with that. So I don't know that I know enough of the technical pieces of that to be able to adequately answer your question. The only thing I know for sure is that based on the way this position is structured, it's required to be offered health care.
I hesitate to support this recommendation, and it's because if it is successful, then we go on a path of hiring a temporary employee at least for 1 more year until the contract negotiations will happen again with that specific bargaining unit. And a look at the contract, yes, does allow for a 9-month temporary employee, but when I read the contract language, it seems the expectation is from time to time a temporary employee may be required. And my fear and hesitation is that if this is successful, that we go on a path of hiring on a continual basis a 9-month temporary employee. And that to me is not a good path for the commission to endorse, because almost all of our employees are union contracted employees, and if we consistently have non-union employees working on a very consistent basis with our union employees, I just see a conflict of how does the union protect its employees and its interest when we hire non-union employees to do work alongside those people. And so I will not be supporting this resolution. Commissioner Kulik.
All of our temporary seasonal employees are non-union employees, and they're working shoulder to shoulder with the existing union staff. This issue has been vetted with the union. They had no problem with this. If Nancy was asking for 15 or 10 temporary people, I would have a different opinion. This is 1 year to see if it makes sense. It may not make sense. Just like the igloo downtown, we approved that for a 1-month period. How are you going to know if it works unless you try it?
It's true. If I thought it was, if I was assured that this was going to be a 1-year trial period, I'd be supportive, because I think it's allowing staff to be flexible in the way that we find people resources to do the jobs that we need to be done in the parks. But my fear is that the inclination is that if this is successful, and I guess I don't see a reason why it wouldn't be, that we go on a continual path of hiring temporary employees. And that might spread to other departments, and it's something I'm not comfortable with.
I'll call the question.
Do I have a second? Commissioner Toles seconds. All those in favor of calling the question?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? So we will go on to calling the question, and this vote is for the original motion. So all those in favor, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
What was the original?
The original motion is to support the creation of the temporary employee, or the budget amendment for the temporary employee.
Yeah, so I'm aye in support of that.
So now we will redo the vote. So all those in favor of the budget amendment for the temporary employee, please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Motion passes 4-3.
You got it. Okay.
3 being
Gillis and
Joseph Gillis Toles. I will move on to announcements on city-related issues and new business. Do we have any announcements? Commissioner Kulik.
I'd just like to thank city staff for the yeoman job that they've done this winter, keeping things together, taking care of the streets and the roads, and our water service guys that are out there in the cold also. Thank you very much. The winter's not over, folks. Don't be parking on the streets, and then don't complain when your street isn't plowed because the snow plow can't get around.
Is there any other announcements? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment for non-agenda items or any city-related business. If you'd like to make public comment, please come up to the front, say your name, and state your address.
Yes, my name is Charles Kinzel, 1020 Glen Avenue. I just want to emphasize, I realize all the important issues, but I think one of the issues that has not come out that is very important is the blight ordinance, enacting and enforcing a blight ordinance. I've been in town for 3 years, and I see just a little, I admit I look for it, but there's an increasing amount of blight occurring in the village, in the city of Mount Pleasant. And the sooner we address it, the easier it will be to enforce it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Al Davis. I live out to Lake Isabella, 111 South Coldwater Road. I sat down with the Airport Advisory Committee and expressed my concerns to them. I believe you got the letter that they wrote. One thing that I would like to add to that is the importance of keeping, the wind turbines back away from Mount Pleasant. I'm shooting for a 5-mile around all the airports and around all the cities. One of the reasons is the biggest one is safety. You know, safety, safety, safety. The other, big reason is the development of the community. If those encroach on the community too close, especially the airport, it stifles the growth of the airport. And let me give you an example. One example is, the other day I went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I drove by Amazon's huge, huge mega center to where they distribute all their items. Mount Pleasant has, UPS right now. If one of the shipping companies decides to come into Mount Pleasant and wants to ship stuff into the airport and then do another mega center or even just a satellite center, with them turbines encroaching on the city of Mount Pleasant and on the airport of Mount Pleasant, once the towers are up or the turbines are up, the growth is done. It's completely done. You'll never get rid of them again. So my concern is, like I say, the safety of that. We also, I can give you a list of a lot of safety issues. I'm not going to go into that. But what I would like to mention is the fact that, everybody is waiting for the FAA determination and the MDOT tall structures determination. We can use those determinations here in the county, but we can go above and beyond because this is our county, our city. Why can't we do better than what they say? It's our community. It's not Apex's community, because they're only here temporary and then they're going to be gone, and they don't care about the growth of the community. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Blake Fiaczynski. I live at 1001 South Main Street, and I am the Student Government Association representative for City Commission. First off, I would like to thank Mayor Joseph for coming in last week and speaking to Student Government Association. We thought that was really cool to be able to get firsthand experience of a student who graduated from Central and how you feel with City Commission, so thank you for that. In the past, CMU really loved the company of the City Commission and would be able to host you in the future. We would love to have bi-yearly meetings at CMU with the City Commission to allow for all students to participate in the city governmental affairs process as well as the process in general. I would love to set up a meeting with the City Commission as well as City Manager Ridley to promote this resolution to continue with this commission to attend CMU at least once a semester, as well as push for commission meetings to attend once a semester in future commissions. We as students feel like we are a very important part of the city and would love to be able to communicate our ideas and thoughts with the commission right now as in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Blake, CMU students are always welcome here every other Monday. Mm-hmm.
Do we have any more public comment on city-related business? Seeing none, I will close the public comment section.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.